Okay, I want you to be honest with me for a second. Picture your nightstand.
Hmm.
You've got your 2026 Bible reading plan sitting there. You open it up, you realize you just finished the historical books, maybe you're feeling good about yourself, and then you turn the page.
Uh-oh.
And suddenly, you are staring down the barrel of the Old Testament prophets.
The dreaded section.
Right. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the whole lineup. What is your immediate, visceral gut reaction?
Is panic too strong a word?
Not at all. I think for most people, it's panic. Maybe a little confusion.
And definitely a sense of guilt.
It makes sense. For the modern reader, walking into the prophets, it feels like walking into a courtroom where you're the defendant.
And you already know you're guilty.
It feels like chapter after chapter of just angry rants, judgment, doom, gloom.
It's some very, very confusing
Yeah.
geography.
It's heavy stuff. And honestly, statistically, it's where reading plans go to die.
It is.
But what if we've been reading it with the wrong glasses on this whole time? What if those books aren't a judge's sentencing manual, but something completely different?
That is the question we are tackling today.
Yeah.
We're unpacking a fascinating reading guide from the Heavenly Postbox channel. It's their 2026 guide, and it's titled Agape Archive, Guide to the Prophet's Aching Love.
And this is a pretty pivotal moment in their reading journey, right?
It is. The source material frames this as like the grand finale of the Old Testament section. They've been walking through the history,
Right.
and now before they cross the bridge into the New Testament next week, they have to confront the prophets.
And just the title alone, Aching Love, that signals a massive shift. The mission of this deep dive is what's pretty ambitious. We want to swap out that lens of fear of judgment for a lens of aching agape.
Right. The source material argues that the prophets aren't shouting about the law. They are. And this is a quote that really stuck with me.
Okay.
The sound of a heartbroken groom shrieking.
Wow. That is such a violent, vivid image to start with.
It is.
It reframes the anger immediately. It's not a cold, bureaucratic anger. It's a passionate one.
Exactly. And the core conflict this guide highlights is the fundamental difference between human love and God's love, or agape.
Okay.
See, human love is almost always transactional or conditional. If you betray me, my love cools down. I put up a wall.
Self-preservation. It's natural.
Precisely. But the source defines God's love in the prophets as aching agape. And it's a paradox. It's a love that decides to pay a higher price the more it is betrayed.
So instead of retracting, it expands.
It expands to cover the debt.
That is so counterintuitive. Goes against every instinct we have.
It does.
But to really get this, the guide sets up a structural comparison that I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
It pits the Song of Songs against the prophets.
This is crucial context. Most people read Song of Songs as this isolated book of, poetry about romance.
Right.
But if you view Song of Songs as the Holy of Holies, the blueprint for the perfect intimate union between God and humanity,
The groom and the bride.
yes, then you have to ask, what are the prophets?
And the guide says the prophets are the scene where that union is brutally broken.
Yes. If Song of Songs is the honeymoon suite, the prophets are the messy, painful divorce proceedings.
In a way, yeah. It's the scene of the betrayal.
But here's the twist. The groom isn't filing for divorce. He's reacting to the heartbreak of a wife who has walked out. And to explain how God reacts, the guide brings in some heavy hitters.
I noticed that. We've got Abraham Heschel, Jürgen Moltmann, Walter Brueggemann. This isn't just fluff.
No, this is deep theology.
So let's start with Heschel. He talks about divine pathos. Break that down for us.
So in classical philosophy, and even in a lot of traditional theology, there's this concept of the unmoved mover. The idea is that God is perfect, self-sufficient, and therefore he cannot be affected by anything humans do. If he could be hurt by us, he wouldn't be all-powerful, right?
Right. If I can make God sad, I have power over God. That seems theologically dangerous.
Exactly. But Heschel looks at the prophets and says, no. The God of the philosophers might be an unmoved mover, but the God of Israel is defined by divine pathos. He isn't indifferent.
He chooses to be affectable.
He is deeply emotionally wounded by human rejection.
So when we read the anger in Isaiah or Jeremiah, it's not a cold judicial anger.
Yeah.
It's not a judge banging a gavel because a rule was broken.
No, it's a husband screaming because his heart is broken. The prophets are the representatives of God's tears.
And then Jürgen Moltmann comes in and takes it a step further. He flips our definition of power completely upside down.
This is one of those blink and you'll miss it insights that changes everything. Moltmann argues that God's omnipotence, his all-powerfulness, isn't about being bulletproof.
Okay.
It's actually his ability to suffer.
Wait, explain that. How is the ability to suffer a form of power?
Think about it. If you are weak, you suffer because you have no choice. The world hurts you and you can't stop it.
Right.
But if you are God, you are immune to everything. So for God to suffer, he has to will it. Moltmann suggests that by choosing to love sinful humans, God voluntarily makes himself the most vulnerable being in existence.
He opens his chest and hands us the knife.
That's it. That is vulnerable love. It's the power to endure pain that you could have easily avoided.
Wow.
And that leads perfectly to Walter Brueggemann's contribution. He calls the prophetic books the ministry of sorrow.
I like this distinction between royal language and sorrow.
Right. Royal language is what you hear from the kings and false prophets. It's everything is fine, law and order.
Maintain the status quo.
It's bureaucratic propaganda. But the prophetic ministry of sorrow cuts through all of that. The prophets aren't just shouting to enforce rules, they're grieving a lost relationship.
They're weeping publicly to shatter the numbness of the people.
Exactly.
So we have this theological foundation now. God isn't a stoic judge. He is vulnerable, he is grieving, and the prophets are the expression of that pain. Now, the source material takes us on a grand tour of the books themselves to see what this looks like in practice.
It does, yeah. It categorizes the major prophets first, giving each one a specific theme of this aching love.
Let's look at Isaiah. The guy calls the theme suffering servant.
This is the classic image. You have the Holy One of Israel, the groom.
Right.
And then you have the bride, who is described in some pretty graphic terms as being covered in sores and sin.
Yeah, Isaiah chapter 1 says, "From the sole of your foot to the top of your head, there is no soundness." She's sick.
She's dying. And the aching love here is substitutionary. The holy groom decides to become the suffering servant to endure the filth and punishment that belong to the bride.
He swaps places.
He swaps places.
Then we move to Jeremiah. The guide labels this the love of tears. And honestly, the imagery the source highlighted here, it is intense.
It is visceral. Jeremiah isn't just sad, he's devastated. The source describes it as God watching his bride run off to commit adultery and feeling his intestines severing with pain.
Intestines severing. We usually sanitize God's emotions. We say he's disappointed or grieved.
Right.
But this sounds like physical trauma.
The Hebrew word for compassion, rachamim, is related to the word for womb. It's a gut-level physical connection. It's not a distant disappointment.
And gut punch.
It is. God is saying, this is tearing me apart inside.
That really changes how you read the weeping prophet. It's not just Jeremiah crying.
It's God crying through him.
Now, Ezekiel. This was my favorite visual from the guide, pursuing love.
Most people think of Ezekiel and think of the weird stuff, right? The dry bones, the wheel within a wheel.
The creatures with four faces, the glory chariot.
The glory chariot, exactly. But the guide asks a great question. Why is the chariot moving, and where is it going?
Usually the glory of God sits in the temple in Jerusalem. It stays put.
Exactly. But in Ezekiel, the glory leaves the temple. It gets on this mobile war chariot, and the source points out that God is riding his glory chariot all the way to Babylon.
Why?
Because that's where the exiles are. That's where the runaway bride is.
He's not riding out to destroy her.
No. He's chasing her down into the foreign land. It's a high-speed chase, but it's a rescue mission. He goes into the unclean land of Babylon to be with his people.
That changes the whole vibe of that book. It's an invasion of love.
It is. And then Daniel is framed as protecting love. God turning the wheels of history to bring the bride home.
So those are the major prophets, the epic sweeping narratives. But the guide argues that the minor prophets provide the intense details.
The specific textures of this love, yeah.
And Hosea is the undeniable standout here. The guide calls it the payment.
You just can't talk about the prophets without talking about Hosea. He's commanded to marry Gomer, a woman who is guaranteed to be unfaithful.
It's a living nightmare. Yeah. She leaves him, has children by other men, and eventually ends up enslaved.
And the specific detail the source highlights is the moment Hosea has to go and buy her back, he finds her on the auction block.
Right.
And he pays 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a half of barley.
It's so specific. Silver and barley. Why does the guide focus on that?
Because it represents a love that stakes its own life and resources. He is paying market value for damaged goods. It's transactional in the sense that a price is paid.
But the motivation is pure grace.
Pure grace. He isn't buying a slave. He is buying his wife back to restore her.
Then there's this reframing of jealousy. in books like Amos and Nahum. Usually when we hear jealousy, we think of a toxic ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, it's petty, insecure.
In human relationships, yes. But the source calls this righteous jealousy or protective passion.
Think of it this way. If Gomer the bride is chasing after idols, those idols aren't just other hobbies, they're destroying her.
The guide compares them to a virus or a predator, right?
Yes. So if your wife is being attacked by a lion and you get angry at the lion, is that hate?
No, it's love.
It's love. God's rage isn't at the bride, it's for the bride.
That is a crucial distinction.
It's like a doctor attacking a virus. The aggression against the sickness is an expression of the love for the patient. God is fighting for her life.
That makes the judgment passages feel so different. And speaking of judgment, the source has this section on reframing the anger that I think is the linchpin of this whole guide. It suggests we shouldn't view the judgment passages as a curse, but as an estimate of sacrifice.
This was the most profound insight for me personally. When God lists the sins in these books, the injustice, the idolatry, the bloodshed, he isn't building a case to execute the bride.
Which is what a prosecutor does.
Yeah.
Here is Exhibit A, B, and C, therefore guilty.
Right. But God is doing an assessment. He is calculating the cost. He himself must pay to redeem her.
Oh, wow. So when he says your sins are scarlet, he's essentially saying,
This is how much it's going to cost me to wash them white.
wow.
Yes. It connects directly back to Isaiah 53. The judgment list becomes the receipt for the suffering servant. Every sin listed is a wound he has to take.
That completely flips the script. You're not reading a condemnation. You're reading a price tag that God is agreeing to pay.
And this is why the prophets had to be what the guide calls pacemakers, or possess a sorrowful imagination.
They weren't just mailmen dropping off a bill.
No, they were visualizations of God's pain. They had to embody it.
Okay.
Think about Ezekiel again. The source notes a terrifying detail. God told Ezekiel that his own wife, the delight of his eyes, was going to die, and God commanded him, "Do not weep."
That sounds incredibly cruel on the surface. Why would God do that?
It was performance art. A visualization of God's shock and grief over losing Jerusalem, a grief so deep and stunning that it went beyond tears.
Or Hosea living with the shame of an unfaithful wife? Or Jeremiah weeping until he literally ran out of tears?
They were acting out the internal state of God so that people could actually see it, not just hear it.
They were walking metaphors.
But all of this leads us to the ultimate problem. The source calls it the Gomer problem.
The Gomer problem. This is the state of Israel and, well, by extension, all of us.
The source references Jeremiah 13.23. Can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots?
Neither can you do good who are accustomed to doing evil. That is bleak. It's saying you guys are stuck.
It's an addiction diagnosis. Gomer isn't just making mistakes. She is addicted to adultery. She literally cannot be holy.
And the old covenant was conditional.
Yeah.
If you obey, I will bless you.
But she couldn't obey.
So we hit a dead end. The bride is hopeless. The marriage is over.
And that is the pivot point. The source says this is where God switches from a conditional "if you" to a sovereign "I will." This is the introduction of the new covenant.
It's no longer about Gomer's ability. It's about the groom's determination. The source outlines 3 pillars of this new covenant. Let's walk through them because this is the solution to the whole mess.
The first pillar is internalization. Under the old way, the law was on stone tablets outside the person. You had to go look at the rock to know what to do.
Yeah.
But God says, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts.
So it's not a rule you have to look up. It becomes a new instinct, like breathing.
Exactly. It becomes part of your nature. The second pillar is what the source calls oblivion, or the amnesia of grace.
I love that phrase, amnesia of grace.
It references Jeremiah 31.34. I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more.
And the guide makes a beautiful point here, that the one thing God cannot do under the new covenant is remember the sins of the beloved.
It's a deliberate forgetting. He chooses to delete the history file. He formats the hard drive.
Gomer's past is gone.
Gone. And the third pillar is spiritual plastic surgery.
A bit of a modern term, but accurate.
It is. It references Ezekiel 36. God says he will remove the heart of stone and transplant a heart of flesh.
This goes back to the leopard changing its spots.
Right. A leopard can't change its spots, but God can change the leopard. It's not just asking Gomer to behave better. It's a constitutional change.
Like a heart transplant.
A heart transplant. So Gomer gets a new heart that actually wants the groom.
That is the only way the marriage works. She has to be remade. Now, before we get to the culmination of this, the guide touches on the silence. The 400 years between the end of the Old Testament and the New.
Usually, people think of this as the dark ages of the Bible. God abandons them, no prophets, no miracles, just silence.
But the guide reframes this as silent agape.
It's the silence of waiting. The groom has shouted, he has wept, he has sent prophets, he has promised a new covenant. Now, he waits.
It's a pregnant pause.
It is. He is waiting for the bride to realize her need.
And that silence is broken by the cry of a baby, and eventually the cry of a man on a cross.
The cross is the receipt. We talked about the estimate of sacrifice earlier, the list of sins and the prophets.
Yeah.
The cross is where that bill is actually paid. The source summarizes the theology beautifully. I will die for you so that you become a being who must love me.
That is the definition of aching love. It's a love that dies to make the bride lovable.
It's the final solution to the Gomer problem. We couldn't change ourselves, so he paid the cost to change us.
This is all incredibly moving, and honestly, it makes me want to go read Jeremiah right now. But we have to ground this for the listener who is actually going to open their Bible in 2026. The guide offers some honey tips for reading. What's the first one?
The first tip is to read the prophets as a bloody love letter. This is a mindset shift. When you open the book and see those harsh words of judgment, don't hear a judge.
What should you hear?
Hear the groom begging his wife not to commit suicide.
That changes the tone immediately. Instead of, I hate you, it's don't do this to yourself, come back.
Exactly. It turns the anger into urgency. The second tip is to empathize with the rejected pride.
Rejected pride.
Yes. Try to feel the pain of a God who is being ignored yet keeps pursuing. It's about feeling that divine pathos we talked about.
Right.
Read it and ask, how would I feel if I did everything for someone and they spat in my face? It creates a connection with the text.
And the third tip.
This is the most practical one. Don't get hung up on geography or hard names.
Oh, that's huge.
It's so easy to get lost in the lists of nations. Moab, Edom, Assyria, and the lists of cities you've never heard of. The guide says, listen for the scream.
Listen for the scream. I like that.
Focus on the emotional frequency of the text rather than the map. If you don't know where Tarshish is, that's fine. But can you hear the emotion in the voice? That's what matters.
It really liberates you to just experience the emotion of the book without needing a PhD in ancient Near Eastern geography.
It makes the reading an emotional journey rather than an academic one.
So if we zoom out, the mission of this Agape Archive deep dive was to change our lens. We started with fear of judgment, the courtroom. And we've ended up with the safety of the new covenant, the wedding.
We've moved from seeing ourselves as a criminal on trial to seeing ourselves as Gomer broken. Yes, definitely guilty, but relentlessly pursued by a groom who paid everything to bring us back.
And the source material leaves us with this reminder. Under this aching love, you are no longer Gomer. You are a pure bride.
The transaction is done. And that's the power of the new covenant. It's not about what we promised to do. It's about what he has already done.
It's incredible to think that this brings us to the end of the Old Testament guide. The source material mentions that next week, the reading plan pivots to the New Testament.
That's right. They're launching a two-part guide to the New Testament next.
So this really is the closing chapter of the shadows before the light arrives. Now, before we let you go, here is something to chew on.
Okay.
We talked about the 400 years of silence, the silent agape, the waiting.
It's a powerful concept to end on.
I wonder, for our listeners, where is the silence in your life right now? Is there an area where God feels absent, where you're praying and getting nothing back but static?
That's a provocative question, because if we follow the pattern of the prophets, that silence isn't absence.
Right.
It's not abandonment. It might just be that same waiting love.
Waiting for the heart to soften, waiting for the bride to look up.
It's definitely worth considering. The silence might just be the deep breath before the next great expression of love.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through the aching love of the prophets. We hope you never read those books the same way again.
It was a pleasure. Happy reading.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.